I'm a guy that's 24. Each day I build some more. I like episode 7 and episode 8. I'm Rich Boy J. Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here back with another video, and this is going to be another episode of the LEGO Star Wars MOC Showcase. In short, this is a collection of MOCs that I've come across on the internet and that I found impressive enough that I wanted to share with you guys. The one thing that I hope you take away from this video is to go and support the builders. I've included the links to all of their builds in the description, so definitely go show them some love if you like what they did. The first MOC we're going to take a look at today is titled Millennium Falcon in Flight by Andreas Lenander, and this is obviously inspired by that one UCS Falcon that I'm sure a lot of you have seen. It's basically like mounted on some metal braces and it is suspended in the air with the hyperdrive glow being what hides those braces. So Andreas was inspired by that and decided to do it at a much smaller scale and 100% with Lego. So this is all Lego, no metal braces needed here. This is obviously at a much smaller scale, so that wouldn't absolutely be necessary. But I love this build for a few reasons. One, I think that the big build is incredible, and I think that this is incredible in its own right. Like it isn't as, maybe visually impressive as a giant falcon being up in the air, but I think that it just makes a nice desk topper, which is pretty cool in my opinion. He basically wasn't able to incorporate the lights in the hyperdrive with, I think, like an LED string, just a string of LEDs kind of going throughout the build there, which I think is really nice. I think that glow and the actual bricks there is really what makes this build. And one of the other cool things I like about this MOC is the city down below. Like there's some pretty cool techniques he used. It's not really obvious like what particular Star Wars city this could be, but it looks Star Warsy enough, which is really the best thing you'd want to accomplish with something like this. He did talk a little bit about the Falcon he created up top, and one of the main goals of this Falcon was to make it lightweight enough to where it could be suspended using just Lego bricks. Like this isn't a tiny Falcon by any means. Like it's probably just slightly smaller than the midi scale Falcon, but I like it because it's still a unique Falcon. He didn't just use a microfighter or a Lego set. He actually went out of his way to make his own custom Falcon, which is cool. I think that the use of those wheel pieces for the corridors actually work really well here, so I like that. I like the just general shape of the Falcon, like a round back. It's nicely rounded, using those wedge plates connected together to make the rear side of the Falcon, which I think looks nice as well. I also think using those black rim pieces as the like exhaust ports on the back of the Falcon is pretty smart. Like that's a good use of those parts. I talked a while back on some of the MOC showcases about Lego potentially doing like a Star Wars architecture line of sets, and I think that this kind of fits in line with that, just with the cityscape below and the Falcon flying above, and I think that this would fit right in with that, especially if they were able to incorporate the lights into the hyperdrive. I think that this would just be a visually appealing thing that you could put on your desk, even if it was like a lamp or something. I don't know. It's just a really cool build. The next build is by Oliver Kude. It is Kijimi from Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. I like the idea of this build in general because when we were first seeing reference photos and like trailer shots from the film of Rise of Skywalker, I was most visually impressed by Kijimi. I thought that it was a really cool and unique looking Star Wars location, and it was probably one of the few like things we saw in trailers that I was like, I'm actually considered building that at a somewhat large scale. It turned out when we actually got to the film that we didn't see a ton of it, which is what kind of dissuaded me from actually going through and building that. But I did think we saw enough to like really make a MOC like this look really nice and stand out. So I'm happy that he did this, especially at such a nice scale. I think when I think of Kijimi, there are two defining characteristics that really make it distinct from any other Star Wars location we've seen, and that is just the aesthetic of those stone buildings as well as the stairs that go all the way through the city. Like there were just a lot of stairs going through Kijimi, and I really think the builder did an excellent job at capturing that. If we take a look at the bottom middle section of the MOC, you can see we have our heroes looking straight up like the disguised clones from the Lego Star Wars video games, but obviously they're trying to hide from the First Order here, and this is the scene where they meet up with Zorii. So she's standing over to the side, and I don't know, I like the way the figures look here. It's a pretty memorable scene from the film, I think. I also just love how the snow is scattered all throughout the MOC. He uses a variety of pieces like cheese slopes, even some quarter circle tiles in here, even like the, not necessarily sure what you'd call it, but it's basically the 1x1 plate with like the nail or tooth, whatever you want to decide that it looks like sticking out of it. There's a bunch of those around some curved slopes as well. There's just snow all over the place, and the builder actually did a very nice job kind of clustering the snow and the crevices of the build. Like, it's one thing to just kind of scatter snow around your MOC, but it's another thing to actually have the snow being settled in places where it would realistically settle, like corners, like crevices, like edges of walls. So I like that the builder took that extra step of realism. I really like the way that the builder designed the doors in this MOC. They're basically circular, and he uses two arches placed on their sides to create the circular design of the door, and he also places some 1x1 plates in there to give it a little extra detail. So we can see there's a door over, or actually two doors over to the left side of the build, and even one over to the right up front on the MOC. So I think those look really nice as well. The way the builder captured the stone in the buildings, I think, looks incredible. There's such a variety of pieces used in this that just goes such a long way in making this look almost exactly the way it should. One of the more useful pieces used in this are those 1x1 plates with the rounded edges. You can see he's actually stacked like a bunch of them up at the edges of the walls where they're kind of meant to be curving around. And I love that LEGO released that piece just really for this exact reason. It's so useful in having curved walls without having to use like hinge plates that leave ugly large gaps. This is a far more seamless solution to having a wall that curves just slightly and has a more gradual curve as opposed to the hinge plates or hinge bricks that LEGO produces. He's also using some masonry bricks in here. He's using some 1x1 circular plates. He's using like snot bricks with tiles placed on their sides that just really give it a diverse stone looking aesthetic to the walls. So I think all of those come together and look really nice. I think the roofs on these buildings also look incredible, and there's one thing I noticed that he's doing, and he's actually like varying the elevation of it, not just by a plate but also half a plate in some circumstances. Like if you zoom in closely on this section of the roof, you can see that some of the plates are sticking out a little bit further than others, and that's because he has the elevation varied between one plate and actually half a plate. So it's like kind of sunken a little bit into the build, but not too much, which is honestly kind of an advanced building technique for something that you might consider trivial, like the roof of a building. In a MOC like this, you'd be very tempted to just, you know, have it varying by plates, but the fact that he actually has the variance by half a plate as well as a whole plate, I think is an awesome. Like, it adds so much more just realism to the and detail to the roofs of these MOC. One other thing that's pretty cool about this build are the wires that are kind of hanging between the two buildings on the left side. I don't know what it is about like wires or cords or strings being implemented in Star Wars MOCs, but they always stick out to me. They just, I don't know, like whereas LEGO is almost pretty constantly like based on like grids and squares and pieces that kind of fit perfectly together, there's just something about the dynamicness, if that's even a word, of strings and chords that add just that extra level of realism to builds. I did also want to point out the stairs over to the left side of the build, because I think it's awesome how gradually they're like curving upwards and like towards the right side, or like basically like upwards and to the right, back behind that main building in the center of this build. I couldn't even begin to tell you how the builder accomplished that, because it's such a slight and gradual curve, but it looks so good. Like, it really captures the aesthetic of Kijimi. The final thing I wanted to talk about on this build that I really liked are just the troops everywhere. The First Order troops are going door to door. We even have a Bulio cameo at the top left corner of the MOC, which is kind of funny. Rest in peace, Bulio. And then over to the right side, you can see we have that boy Kylo Ren talking to some troops, trying to figure out where the heck our heroes are hiding in the city. So all in all, I think this is an incredible build, and I'm just really happy this person did it, because I didn't necessarily want to go out of my way to build this MOC. This next MOC is by Sully entitled Riots on Corellia. I love the door in this build. That was the first thing I noticed about this MOC, and really the thing that made me decide, oh, this has to go in the MOC showcase. One thing I wanted to discuss before we talk about the actual MOC is This is one of those builds that are part of like an ongoing build series that have an overarching story incorporated with it, and I just wanted to point that out because if you guys follow the links in the descriptions, you can actually see the story, the captions that the builders have included in this to give you some context about what's being portrayed here, and you can also just get a look at some of the other builds that are a part of the storyline. So if you see these builds and you like them, definitely check out the links in the description, because a lot of times the ones that look like these kind of smaller vignette builds actually do have a story behind them, and you can see even more builds that are basically furthering the story behind this. So that's something you guys can check out. But in terms of the actual build, like I said, that door in the background I think just looks awesome. I love those nougat masonry bricks behind it. I think that looks perfect. That is definitely something that I will be incorporating into a build at some point. I don't know what build it'll be. I don't know what even I'll be doing that would use it, but I will find a way to incorporate that door design, because that door design looks really cool to me. I also just like the dark orange and nougat colors that are just built into various areas on this MOC. I think it looks really nice. Just dark gray and dark orange and nougat just go really well together in LEGO. Judging by the title and the way the figures are depicted here, there is obviously some sort of riot or work strike. Looks like we have workers in the background that are picketing against something, picketing against the Republic in some way. They have some signs with some galactic basic on it, and we have the clone troopers on the right side basically just patrolling. Like one of them even has a riot shield, so I'm assuming it's some sort of riot trooper, and they're basically just trying to subdue whatever uprising is supposedly happening in this area. So it's a small contained build, but once again, I stress this almost every single week. Just by looking at it, you can tell the story that this build is trying to convey. You can obviously go check out the link and read the caption, but even if you decide not to do that, just the build alone tells a pretty cohesive story about what the guys in the background are trying to do and what the clones are trying to do. So I love builds that do this. I think that is really just a testament to your skills as a builder to be able to position minifigs, have certain facial expressions, have them performing certain actions that just tell the whole story without you having to say a word. This next build is by Eivind Loekken. I really hope I pronounced that right, because this thing is absolutely ridiculous. It honestly blows my mind that this is even possible. I've featured some pretty outrageous vehicle builds on this series, namely like the Tantive I did, even that giant Star Destroyer that initially was just a render, but the builder actually started working on. But this has to be the most impressive build that I put on this MOC showcase. This is a giant Millennium Falcon. Pictures don't do it justice. The builder says that it is 50 inches by 70 inches, which is basically like 4 feet by 6 feet. For one single Lego Star Wars vehicle. Like, that's just one vehicle. That's bigger than most large scale MOCs out there, like landscape MOCs. Imagine taking like one of the biggest landscape Star Wars MOCs you've ever seen and make it just a big Millennium Falcon instead. I really just can't convey to you guys how outrageous it is that this builder has been able to do this. Like, it's absolutely incredible. So this first shot is just of the front, and right off the bat you can tell that he put a lot of time into figuring out the details on this build. I think one of the things that I like so much about this build is oftentimes when builders make like a big vehicle, I feel like they kind of cut corners in terms of the small details and the shaping of things, which is honestly disappointing, because when you're building big like this, I feel like it gives you more freedom to have curves that are more accurately represented, because you're not just at the mercy of small Lego wedge plates, but you have a much greater area of size you can work with to really accomplish the shape that you're trying to do. But most builders don't take advantage of that. I feel that is certainly not the case with this build. This builder absolutely takes advantage of so many different types of Lego parts to make this build really just work, which I think is incredible. If we just look at the sides alone, like this isn't the type of thing where I can just go through and point out all the build techniques that I like, because there's so many in terms of the greebling on this thing. Like, I would just be here for hours talking about all the various parts usages, but I just want you to take in a lot of these subsections as a whole and really appreciate the amount of detail that the builder has incorporated into this. I like this photo also because it kind of puts the build in a perspective. We can see that's actually a maxi fig. If you're not familiar with it, these are just bigger minifigs that Lego did back in the day that had far more posability than the traditional minifigs, and I think they're at least like 3 times as big as a minifig, maybe even slightly more. But you can see that, you know, if you just had a minifig standing on top of a Falcon and it's scaled this way, like, it would still be a big Falcon. But the fact that he has a maxi fig standing on this Falcon and the maxi fig looks puny compared to it is just a testament to how giant this MOC actually is. I think one of the sections of this build that I really like are the insides of the mandibles, because it's kind of hidden in shadows, so you can't see a bunch of it, but there's just various like pipes of various colors going through it, and I think it looks really good. It really does just convey how kind of a mess the exterior of the Falcon is with all the exposed mechanical parts of it, and I think that is absolutely what you want to accomplish when building a Falcon, especially when you're building a Falcon at this scale. Next photo is a close look at the cockpit, and for a brick built cockpit, like, this is pretty perfect looking. Like, I love that he's used the flex tubing on the front to connect those main window bars to, and you can see on the inside there's some pretty detailed looking chairs. Because this is a larger scaled MOC, the consoles that he's been able to incorporate are extremely detailed, which is awesome. That's exactly what you would want to see from something like this, and I think that just the overall shape of the cockpit comes together really well. Like, this is just a nicely made Lego cone. This next photo is a look at the top of the rear section of the Falcon, where you can really just take in the variety of pieces used here. I like the technique that he's used for those 6 exhaust ports, using the grill tiles in the middle, and then of course cheese slopes on hinge plates to have the circles wrapping around them. There's so many various parts used throughout this. Like, I've noticed like the buckle handle pieces, the like engine pieces used in this, rim pieces, even some expensive parts like these light bluish gray turntables right here. Like, there's just so many just pieces used throughout this to create these just like really detailed looking like technical or mechanical aspects of the Falcon, and I think that's great. I also love the use of color in this. Like, it'd be really easy for someone to just go with light grays and dark grays for the surface of the Falcon, but the Falcon is so much more than that. I think that one of the underrated colors for really most Star Wars MOCs is sand blue, which the builder actually uses pretty extensively in this MOC. Sand blue is actually a color that you'd see a lot more often than you think on Star Wars vehicles, including TIE fighters, which, I mean, we've had arguments about this on stream. I'd argue that the original TIE fighter is almost exclusively sand blue compared to light bluish gray. But in terms of the Falcon, I think that the usage of those colors like the sand blues, like the dark tans, are really nice. Compare this to the UCS Falcon, where they do try to do the same thing, but I think they kind of go overboard with it by throwing in colors like olive green, which I don't think match up with the surface of the Falcon which I don't think matches up pretty well with the surface of the Falcon. But I think the builder does a great job here at incorporating color, but not too much color, especially when you're building at such a large scale. This next photo is a look at the back of the Falcon, and one of the coolest things about this is it has a light up hyperdrive. I think that when you think of the Falcon, this is probably one of the more familiar or more famous shots of the Falcon, a shot of the rear of the Falcon taking off, avoiding some sort of impending threat, and I think that that's awesome. I love the way that he's built these fins on the back, very reminiscent to the exterior of Marshall Banana's Falcon, but kind of scaled up, and I think it just looks really good. I think you also just really have to appreciate the shaping of this build from this angle. Like, there aren't any huge gaps at all. Everything just comes together almost seamlessly, which is incredible. I think that the 2 corridors on the left and right side, specifically those circular sections, actually look really nice. There's like a nice conical shape that he's achieving there, and just the whole of the Falcon itself looks so accurate, so true to what it should look like. All in all, this build is just nothing short of incredible. The builder has mentioned that at this point the Falcon's kind of hard to flip, which I can imagine. The thing's 4 feet by 6 feet in area, so I mean, I honestly couldn't imagine trying to work on the underside of this thing, but it's all detailed. It's all just very well thought out, and I think that that's incredible. This is something that I would pay money to see in person at some point. And like I said, this might be the most impressive build that we've ever reviewed here on the MOC Showcase. So I definitely want you guys to go to his Flickr page. I think he's actually, I mean, he just recently, I don't know if the MOC is finished at this point, but he's been posting pictures of this recently, so he's active. It's not like some of the other bigger MOCs we reviewed where like we don't even know how to get in contact with the builders, but this guy is certainly active, and I know he would love to hear you guys' feedback on this incredible model. This is an incredible Lego Star Wars just build that has kind of flown under the radar up to this point, so I want to give this guy as much recognition as we can possibly get him. So please go ahead and take it out of your time to just go show him some support on his Flickr page. I've included the link in the description. He certainly deserves it, really more than any other project we've looked at here on the MOC Showcase.